You're listening to the Travis Makes Money podcast presented by GoHighLevel.com. For a free 30-day trial of the best all-in-one digital marketing software tool on the planet, just go to GoHighLevel.com/Travis. What is going on, money makers? Welcome back to the Travis Makes Money podcast, where it's our mission to help you make more money. Today, we are talking about happiness and how money correlates to happiness, if it does at all. And that's with our guest, Dr. Elia Gourgouris. Dr. Elia is a happiness expert, so to speak. He's known as America's Happiness Doctor, is the author of the #1 best-selling Amazon book, 7 Paths to Lasting Happiness, which has been translated in 5 languages. With his positive psychology background and through his books, keynotes, podcast interviews, and executive coaching, he's helped hundreds of thousands of people, both in their careers and in their relationships, to achieve happiness and success in their personal and professional lives. Dr. Elia, thank you so much for taking the time to join me on the show today.
Thank you, Travis. It's my pleasure.
So first off, let's talk a little bit about money, the money side of things. Tell me about how you made your first dollar ever.
Oh my goodness. The first dollar. So, we didn't come from a lot of money in my family when we moved to the United States. So when I was a student at UCLA, I drove a taxi in Los Angeles. So as a taxi driver, I used to work like 3 days a week so I can pay my tuition, pay my rent, and make ends meet. So that was my first real job.
Nice. That's awesome. Tell me now how you made your most recent dollar.
I think the most recent dollars has to do, from executive coaching. I'm producing a movie on kindness, so that's a big project of mine, and I'm very passionate about it. So we're hoping to get it to Sundance this fall. So that's a big, big project.
Yeah, no kidding. Where did that idea come from?
It's been it's a movement. I have a company called the Kindness Factor International, and we're the voice of kindness in entertainment. So we're collaborating with Kindness Worldwide to produce a movie that I think will inspire people throughout the globe to bring kindness to their communities. And it started with a very small act of kindness that now has grown and grown and grown, and it's amazing to see. So, we just filmed this weekend, actually. Very exciting. We got a lot of good footage, and we'll continue to produce it. We're going to be, our deadline, September 1st, we'll be done with the movie. So, very
Great.
exciting.
Wow. How do you view being nice versus being kind?
I think being kind is the greatest gift we can give to one another. I think being nice sometimes has some ulterior motives, right? I want to be nice because maybe that way people will like me. Where I think kindness is heart-centered. Kindness comes from here. You do it, and you don't even expect anything in return. You just do it because it's the right thing to do, because it feels good. And, as we know, it activates the greatest drug dealer in the world. That's the human brain. When we perform acts of kindness, all kinds of beautiful chemicals get released into our system and make us happier and make us feel really connected to one another. Being nice, there's nothing wrong with being nice, but you better make sure, why are you being nice?
Yeah.
And who are you being nice to? Because people who are too nice sometimes don't have the right boundaries.
Yeah, right.
They don't know how to say no. And
They're
ultimately,
passive.
it costs them physically, can cost them physically their physical health, but certainly their emotional and mental health.
Yeah. Yeah. I've never seen anybody do extraordinary things and be described as like a nice guy or nice girl or nice person. It's just kind. That's something you can strive for. But when you're doing extraordinary things, you're inevitably going to hurt people's feelings, and you're going to break some things along the way. If you can insert kindness into your milieu, then that's obviously a great thing. But I find personally that being nice is just not a great thing to strive for. That's why I kind of asked that from a selfish perspective. But anyway, okay, so let's jump back into the money stuff here. So now you are speaking all over the place. You have a podcast. You talk almost exclusively about happiness. You're the happiness doctor. I grew up in the frame like very religious, and a lot of people that grew up religious tend to have limiting beliefs around money, especially when you grow up as religious as I did. And that can sometimes be difficult to rewire as you get into adulthood.
Absolutely.
That like money isn't bad and things like that. And there's a lot of religions that would say that pursuit of money is bad, or the love of money is bad, and obviously the love of money versus money itself could be the differentiating factor there. But I guess what I'm trying to say is, does money contribute to happiness, and if so, to what capacity?
I think there's a line. If you make below it, and you're struggling to make ends meet, or you're in debt and you're drowning in debt, or you're drowning, or you're just paycheck to paycheck, that's really hard to be happy because you're in survival mode. But if your needs are taken care of for yourself and your family, making an excessive amount of money doesn't really change your state of happiness. What does change your state of happiness has to do, and I call that it's an inside job. you know, Happiness is a choice, but it's also a skill set. And to me personally, you're right. We have a very complicated relationship with money. Growing up is like money is the root of all evil, or wealthy people or rich people must have done something bad in order to accumulate that wealth.
Yeah.
So there's perception that being successful equates to you being like actually a bad person. I had on my show, The Happy Hour, the legendary David Meltzer, who, I don't know if you know David, but he has a fantastic story. At the age
Yeah.
of 32, he was worth $100 million, lost everything, and then regained it, and he's bigger than ever before. And his motto, he taught me something very sweet. He goes, you know what? Three things in life: make a lot of money, help a lot of people, have a lot of fun. And when he said that, I said, Dave, I agree with you. I'm Greek, so I'm maybe a little bit backwards. Have a lot of fun, help a lot of people, make a lot of money. It's kind of like, but I think that trifecta is a great recipe for a wonderful, wonderful life. And obviously, if you make a lot of money, you have an opportunity to help and bless people's lives across the globe.
Yeah.
So money is not the enemy. Money is not the root of all evil. Like you, I grew up the same way. I know what you mean about that, and how when we're young and we hear things like that, we get programmed,
Yeah.
and we have to unprogram all that negativity towards money to say, you know what? To me, money equals freedom. That's the best way to describe it. Money is
Hmm.
freedom, not the love of money, but money itself. At least in this universe, in this world, is necessary, and
Yeah.
it's okay to
Right.
make money.
And it seems to me that money is just neutral. People like to assign characteristics to money as though it is intrinsically good or intrinsically bad or some other version of those adjectives. And ultimately, my opinion is that it's none of those things. It's a neutral tool, and therefore, if it is a neutral tool, I'd rather have a lot more of it than a lot less of it, because life tends to get a little bit easier if you got some money. And that's why we sign off every show by saying money only solves your money problems, but it's easier to solve the rest of your problems if you got some money in the bank. And that happens to be the truth. It's like if you are struggling with self-worth, you're struggling with relationships, you're struggling with some of these other things that money's not going to be able to solve. If you had the money problem taken care of, you didn't have to worry about where your next meal is coming from. You didn't have to worry about putting shoes on your kids' feet
Right.
next month when they grow out of it. If you didn't have to worry about those things, then much more of your focus and energy can be spent on the other things that money can't solve. But if you are always worrying about where the next meal is coming from, if you are in debt, if there is more month at the end of your money every single month, and then you're probably going to be thinking the majority of your time about money. And you're not going to have as much leftover time or energy to focus on some of the other areas that are arguably more important than money, but can't be worked on until the money problem's taken care of.
Yeah, because issues with money create stress.
Yeah.
Long-term exposure to stress, as you know, cortisol gets released into your system, is devastating to you. And I unfortunately, I think most people live with even if they do have money, this is the interesting thing, they live with a shortage. There's not an abundance mentality. Even if they have
Yeah.
savings in the bank, they're always like afraid of they're going to lose the money.
Yeah.
And sometimes the older you get, and I've seen that with people, I work with people, who maybe even retired, and you think from the outside, man, you have a nice retirement, you're comfortable. They're always worried about money. They're stressed out about money because they're not making any money necessarily.
Hmm.
So scarcity mentality comes in, abundance mentality goes out, and that increases their stress levels, and therefore their unhappiness.
So if money doesn't contribute to happiness beyond a certain level, like you kind of alluded to earlier. And I think there's a lot of data that can prove
Right.
what I forget exactly what the number is, but it's
It was
something like
70,000, more or less.
70,000.
Yeah.
Yeah,
In the
yeah.
United States, I mean, obviously that's depending on what
Sure.
country
Yeah.
you're in, right?
70,000 across the world would put you in like top
Yeah, you're
top
doing really
1% of
good.
their economy. Yeah.
Right.
But 70,000 in the US, basically, if you're making that or above, then there's not much. There, having 700,000 versus 70,000, there's not going to be a much larger contribution to happiness in that delta. So, what are some of the other contributing factors to living a happier life?
I think the one that's never mentioned, because a lot of things, I mean, like practice self-care, and obviously happy people practice considerable self-care physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. Or having an attitude of gratitude, which is a wonderful sentence and it rhymes, right? Um, but I'm from the school, like we're all graduates from the University of Adversity. We all face adversity. And actually, the older you get, the higher the degree you have from that university, because you've experienced more of life. So the question is, listen, when things are going well, to be grateful, it's the easiest thing in the world. I can write 3 things down, what I'm grateful for on a daily basis for a year, and never repeat myself when things are going well in life. But that's not how life really works. So the question is, can we be grateful in the midst of adversity? And one of my all-time heroes, Nelson Mandela, former president of South Africa, who was in prison for 3 decades and came out with a beautiful smile and a warm heart and a kind spirit, said the following, so profound. He said, in life, either you win or you learn, meaning there's no losing. And Travis, you and I, and the folks that are listening and your followers, we've all achieved some kind of success in some areas of our lives, inevitably. Isn't it true, though, the greatest lessons we have ever learned did not come from our successes, but came from what at the time appeared to be a setback, a mistake, a human frailty,
Yeah.
right? When you look back, you go say, you know what? I know it now. I know exactly why that happened to me, or else I wouldn't be the person that I am today.
Yeah. Right.
So those lessons are huge. So be grateful for those lessons. The all classic, when something terrible happens to us, it's common, it's human nature to go into victim mode. Why is this happening to me? Poor me, right? Well, what if we were to just switch that a little bit and say, why is this happening for me? Not
Mm.
to me, but for me. And that's when you grab the lessons. And once you get the lessons, you're actually grateful. Obviously, not while we're going through it. I'm not saying you should be dancing in the streets when you're going through a crisis, a physical health crisis, or a financial crisis, whatever. But in retrospect, I'm so grateful for the things that I've gone through, who may have been tragic at the time,
Yeah.
or difficult things at the time.
You wrote a book called The Seven Paths to Lasting Happiness. Can we go through a couple of those paths?
Sure. So we talked about self-care, self-love. That's number one. Gratitude is number two. The one that's, I think, missing in action, unfortunately, has to do with forgiveness.
Hmm.
And, Gandhi said forgiveness is the attribute of the strong. I would say forgiveness equals freedom. Unfortunately, self-forgiveness, which to me is the ultimate act of self-compassion, is to forgive ourselves. Self-forgiveness is missing in action in most people's lives, unfortunately. And I think that's crucial to one's happiness. And I can declare this publicly, on my self-forgiveness list, it's empty. And my wife, 35 years married, my wife says, how do you do that? Like, you don't have anything on. I said, you know what? Number one, I don't take myself too seriously. That's part of it,
Yeah.
But you also have to do the work. So when I coach people, inevitably, we go through the self-forgiveness list. And actually, the way that to do it, it's not that hard. Just people just don't know how to do it. And I can take 60 seconds and tell you this is how you do it. I have them to write down everything that I haven't forgiven themselves for. Bullet points, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Could be 5 things, 10 things, or 50 things. I don't really care. But I want you to write everything down. When you're done, you put a number next to each one of those statements. A 10 is, I actually murder somebody. Because we are so hard on people. Oh, that's a 10. I can never forgive myself for that. I'm like, did you kill somebody? No. It's not a 10 then. It could be an 8, right? And the 1 is, I was wearing a white shirt. I went on a business meeting, last night. We had dinner with some colleagues. And I spilled some red wine on my white shirt. Kind of embarrassing. Okay, that's a 1.
Yeah.
So, and now we begin the process. We start going through. It typically starts with the 1s, 2s, and 3s. You gain some practice, you gain some momentum, and then move on to the tougher things to forgive. I have known people that have things on their list that go back 5 decades, over 50 years of things that they haven't forgiven themselves for.
Wow.
So imagine we wake up in the morning, people that have their forgiveness list is full, they put on a backpack full of rock, boulders, pebbles, stones, whatever, which has to do with resentments, which has to do with so-called mistakes and so on. And they do that every day. That's how they walk through life. And they have a dark cloud over their head because it weighs them down.
Yeah.
When I go through this exercise with my clients, when we walk out, they give me a big hug. I give them a big hug. You know what they whisper in my ear? Besides the thank you, I wish I had done that a long time ago. And I feel like 100 or 1,000 pounds have been lifted off of me, and they're free. So, but it's unfortunately that's one of the 7 paths out of the 7 ones. I think that's missing in action for most people.
Is it simply a matter of just saying the words "I forgive you" to yourself, or like how do you actually like? I guess what I'm saying is somebody might be able to go through that exercise and do the thing and go through the ritual, but leave subconsciously knowing that they didn't actually forgive themselves. Like how do you in practice do that?
Well, in practice, I mean, I simplified it because of the lack of time that we have here, but the actual process sometimes could take hours to go through that. But as we go through, it reads each statement. If they're not ready to let it go, like, why are you holding on to this? How does this benefit your life? And if you were to talk to your younger self, you have the wisdom now and the experience where you can look back 50. What did you know 50 years ago? You didn't know nothing. You were just a young person who made a mistake. And guess what? Welcome to the human race. But, so we go through that. And what if you're holding on to it, is there some kind of benefit? But at some point, we begin to unravel and we begin to let go. And believe me, when you do the 1s, 2s, and 3s, which are easy to forgive, right? You gain the momentum and you begin to feel lighter, even as you're doing the exercises.
Yeah.
Sometimes it could take, I've done sessions that have taken 2 or 3 hours.
Yeah.
Like we said outside, there's no end. We'll end whenever it ends. But they're beginning to feel like, oh my gosh, this feels, how do you feel about this? Are you ready to let it go? Are you going to pick it up again after you leave my office? No, because now that you say, I have a way of saying things to them. It's like, well, now that you say it out loud, it sounds kind of stupid that I haven't forgiven myself. I'm like, I didn't say that. You said that. Let's go with that. You know what I mean?
Well,
and that's how we do it.
I'm fascinated with the concept of how most people don't do, the golden rule, do unto others what you'd want to be done unto you, but they don't follow that for themselves. They don't do unto themselves what they want to be done unto themselves by others. You know what I mean? Like they don't even hold themselves to the same standard that they hold other people to. Like if anybody else in your life talked to you the way that you talk to yourself, what would you do to them? And a lot of times, like, well, I'd punch them in the face. Like, no, you can't talk to me like that. Well, it's like, well, why do you allow yourself to talk to you like that then? Like you are actively creating like 2 personas inside of yourself that conflict with each other all the time, that causes this lack of congruency in your mind and your psychology. It makes you trust yourself less. It makes you like yourself less. It makes you respect yourself less. And it's only controlled by you. You are the one that's doing this to you. So if you wouldn't do it to the people that you love the most, the people that are closest to you, if you wouldn't say that to those people, then stop allowing yourself to get away with saying those things to yourself, because it does 0 things for you except for make the problem worse.
Travis, you're totally right. When I was a clinical psychologist in private practice, I worked with a lot of addicts because my dissertation was on Alcoholics Anonymous. And of course, addicts, as you know, when they come into you, they're hit rock bottom. And in order to overcome exactly what you just described and that leads into self-forgiveness, I would ask them to bring a picture of themselves when they were really, really young. The cutest little boy or little girl they had. In some ways, their inner child. And I would take a sheet of paper and I'm like, after you act out, whether it's drugs, alcohol, porn, whatever the case may be, when you look in the mirror, what are you saying to yourself? I want words. I'm a loser. I'm a fuck up. I'm like, I'm depressed. I'm sad. I'm disgusted with myself. And they go down the list. I'm like, all kinds of adjectives that are negative and painful. And I go, when we get to 10 of them, I'm like, okay, stop. Now, put that aside. Take a look at this little boy or this little girl. Tell me what you see. And usually it's this cute little boy, girl with a smile on their face. I'm like, love, kindness, adorable, playful, just princess, whatever you want to call it. And then I put the two side by side, and I'm like, okay, now take the 10 adjectives you used and start telling her or him those words.
Hmm.
The most anyone got through was 3 words before they broke down and started to cry. I'm like, so you wouldn't say that to your little boy or to your little girl, and yet you say that to yourself. But guess what? It's same heart, same eyes, same face. You're just a little bit older. And
Yeah.
because you can't say that. Would you ever say those things to a kid? Of course not.
No.
Most normal people wouldn't. So why are you saying it to yourself, just like you said, Travis? Why are you beating yourself up like that, day in and day out, where the inner critic is just annihilating you,
Yeah.
right? But
Yeah.
you wouldn't do that to your little boy or little girl. So therefore, I said, this little boy or little girl is your guardian angel. He or she is there to remind you the best of you.
Yeah.
So take care of him and her as she or he takes care of you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you begin because the dichotomy that you talked about, two different personas, we got to meld this to become one. It's one and the same person, but we've cut off. We're cut off. I would never do that to a kid. Well, why are you doing it to yourself then?
Yeah. Yeah. And like you said earlier, what good is it doing to anybody to do that? You think that you're getting ahead of what other people are going to call you or what other people think of you. So you want to beat them to the punch and do it yourself. It's like, well, I mean, there's nothing productive that's coming out of this.
Nobody ever
The people
improved
that are
their.
closest to you aren't gonna say all that stuff that you're saying to yourself anyway. Like they're for you. They want you to do better. They want you to do well. Like they're not tearing you down and calling you the things that you call yourself. Why are you allowing yourself to do it?
Nobody ever got better if they got criticized enough. And I'm talking about self-criticism or criticized from the outside. Nobody ever improved. Maybe they will succumb if you, with a power structure, there was an abusive parents to a
Yeah.
kid or whatever, and they did it because they were afraid. But the minute they weren't under that, nobody gets better if you get criticized enough. That's why the whole terminology of let me give you some constructive criticism, that's an oxymoron. And anybody who does it is a moron, basically. There's nothing constructive about criticism. Now, give me some feedback and let me get curious about how you see me or that's a whole different story. Because
Yeah.
feedback is the breakfast of champions. Criticism is not.
Yeah. It's almost like a selfish thing to want to call yourself all those things because it makes you, it almost gives you an excuse to continue doing that detrimental action because you're adopting the identity of being that person. You're telling yourself, I am a loser. And you're not saying that I lost. Like you're telling yourself, I am a, fuck up, but I didn't just mess up. I am this. And you're adopting these identities that are internal. And it makes you maybe feel a little bit less pain the next time that you do it because you've told yourself that that's just who I am. And if you are allowing yourself to name these certain characteristics and adopt those identities, it's kind of selfish in a way, I think.
And oftentimes, this is unfortunate. I work with a lot of teenagers who are called all kinds of things, get bullied, and whether at home or at school or both. And at some point, I said, "You realize that when somebody calls you that's a projection?" They're like, "Well, what's a projection?" I'm like, "That's their projection. That's not you. They're talking about themselves. They're just pointing at you or yelling at you. But whatever words are coming out of their mouth, that's a reflection of who they are on the inside, right? So don't own it because it's not yours."
It's a dangerous activity to internalize those things and have them become your identity.
Except that when we're young, we don't know other people are projecting onto us, so we take it as well. Especially if it's a parent or somebody significant,
Sure. Teacher.
other.
Yeah.
Of course, so we take it as well. It must be true. But as we get older, I've been able to look back a couple of things that I thought they were mine, and they weren't horrible necessarily. When I was young, my dad, who was a kind of a tough Greek guy, old school, different generation, so on. One time I was crying. I was 15. I was crying when I was talking to my mom, and he turned to me and goes, "You're too sensitive." And Travis, it cut me to the core because I was sensitive as a young boy. It's true. But my sensitivity as an adult, as a psychologist, as a coach, is one of my greatest attributes.
Yeah.
And it took me years until I finally did the work when I realized, you know what? That was just your dad's projection, man. It had nothing to do with you. As a matter of fact, underneath all that machismo and bravado, Dad was really sensitive. He just didn't know how to get in touch with that side of himself because he didn't grow up that way. He grew up in it. You don't say I love you. You don't show it. It's kind of a tough guy. He was
Yeah.
just talking about himself, but he projected it onto you, and then you, Elia, carried it for 4 decades. Right?
It's a
That was
long
my
time.
experience, and it was very painful. But when I healed that part of me, and I recognized, I was able to love my dad even more. God rest his soul,
Yeah.
because I realized it wasn't mine. That was his. You know.
Man, I've really appreciated this conversation, Dr. Ely. I appreciate you coming on the show and talking about this. I know we typically go down ways to make money and ways to earn income and all that kind of stuff, but every once in a while, it's a good thing to remind ourselves why we're doing all this to begin with, and to know that it's beyond a certain level of income. You're not going to make yourself any happier. Remember, money only solves your money problems, and then you're left to solve all the other problems. So I'm glad that we were able to talk through a little bit about how to solve the happiness problem, because ultimately, that's what we're all here for anyway. You know what I mean? It's not a good scenario to end up with a lot of money and no happiness. So I genuinely appreciate your work in the world. Where can people go to learn more about you and what you got going on?
LinkedIn, or my website, dreliagourgouris.com, Facebook, Instagram, you can find me.
And
But
you
the
have a
one thing,
podcast.
my parting comment is this: don't procrastinate your happiness. Forget all the whens. When such and such happens in order for me to be happy.
Yeah.
Life is too short. Life is precious. Life is fragile. So live your best life now.
You have a podcast as well, right?
I do. The kindness factor, yes.
Kindness Factor. So go check out the Kindness Factor wherever you're listening to podcast, wherever you're listening to this episode right now. Go check out the Kindness Factor if you like some of the stuff that Dr. Ilya was talking about today. Thanks so much for doing that. Again, everybody else, remember, money only solves your money problems, but it's easier to solve the rest of your problems if you got some money in the bank. So let's solve that problem first here on the Travis Makes Money podcast. Thanks for tuning in, guys. Catch you next time. Peace out.